Welcome everyone to our Aging in Place webinar. I'm Carol Anderson. I am the Marketing Director here at Generations Law Group, and I'm the moderator for today's webinar. If you're hoping to stay in your home as you age, even if you need assistance to do so, planning is key. So today we're going to introduce you to Bill and Susan. They are an imaginary couple, and they are going to help us illustrate the process of planning for long-term care and aging in place. So through our hypothetical scenario and couple, we're going to discuss the steps involved to plan and what it will look like if you have a crisis and need to put a plan into action. So our panelists today, in order of appearance, we have attorney Samantha Gentle. And Samantha is an associate attorney with Generations Law Group. She has many years of legal experience, specializing in the areas of elder law, estate planning, Medicaid mass health applications and appeals, asset protection, and guardianships and conservatorships. She was recently named a rising star by Super Lawyers, recognizing her as one of the top 2.5% of lawyers in Massachusetts under the age of 40. We have Angela Spears. Angela has 20 plus years of experience in the world of corporate accounting. A few years ago, she decided to pivot and change careers. She enjoys working with numbers and has always strived to help others. So she put her business degree to use and started her own practice. Within the many areas of her planning capabilities, Angela has found a true passion for educating everyone about the importance of long-term care planning. And Angela works for the New York Life Boston office. And then we have Dave Tasto. Dave is the owner of Assisting Hands Home Care based in Medford, Mass. He is active in the local community, serving on the board of directors for the Bedford, Mass Chamber of Commerce, supporting local schools and veterans programs, and being involved in his church. His commitment to helping families keep loved ones healthy at home is evident in his published book, Thriving at Home, a handbook for preventing hospital stays. So thank you to our panelists, to Sam, Angela, and Dave, for taking the time to discuss how folks can plan ahead to age in place and what it actually looks like to put a plan in action. So as I mentioned earlier, we have created a scenario about an imaginary couple named Bill and Susan to help us illustrate the aging in place plan. They are both 58 years old and hypothetically met with attorney Samantha Gentle while accompanying Bill's 85-year-old parents to an appointment a few months earlier. There was a very stressful time because Bill's father had a medical crisis and needed long-term care immediately. Bill's parents had no estate planning documents in place. They needed help protecting Bill's parents' assets from Massachusetts Medicaid, or known as Mass Health, and also needed Samantha's assistance applying to Mass Health in order to pay for his long-term care. Bill and Susan saw firsthand how stressful managing a crisis like the one Bill's parents had can be. They both agreed that they did not want to put this burden on themselves, nor did they want to put their own adult children under that kind of pressure if it could all be avoided by planning ahead. So Bill and Susan discussed with each other how they saw themselves aging. They wanted to age in their longtime home for as long as possible, even if they were requiring assistance to do so. They agreed that they would get their affairs in order and plan ahead for a crisis to try to achieve their goals. Their first step was to meet with elder law attorney Samantha Gentle. So Sam, can you please discuss how you would work with our imaginary couple, Bill and Susan?
Absolutely. First, we would talk about the documents that are used while you're alive. And even though they're in their 50s, everyone over the age of 18 needs these documents. So nobody should wait to get them. The first document, it would be the durable power of attorney. The whole point of having a power of attorney, and then I'll talk about healthcare proxy next, is when you don't have these documents in place, which name people to make decisions for you when you can no longer make them for yourself, your spouse or a loved one will need court authority to make these same decisions. You get that authority through the probate and family court. It can cost thousands of dollars in attorney's fees, cause unnecessary delay and unnecessary stress, and it can be very easily avoided by doing an estate plan in advance. So power of attorney names someone to make financial decisions for you if you can't make them for yourself. We recommend that you have a power of attorney that's effective immediately, as opposed to springing, which springing power of attorney means it springs into action when activated by a doctor. I don't recommend those because sometimes there can be a significant delay in getting that doctor's letter. And I had a client that was in a nursing home with dementia, had lost capacity. It took over a month to get the doctor to write the letter because doctors at nursing homes may only come by once a week or less. And in that time, we lost about $20,000 of that woman's money that we could have protected. So, of course, you should name someone you trust in these documents. And then, so there shouldn't be an issue with it being effective immediately. And then they can help you right away when you need help. So the next document is a healthcare proxy. So this is naming someone to make healthcare decisions when you can no longer make them for yourself. Unlike the power of attorney, it has to be activated by a doctor. And so a doctor writes a letter stating that this person can no longer make decisions for themselves and their healthcare agent needs to take over. You can get a free healthcare proxy online or at your doctor's office, which can be fine in most circumstances. However, like I said, the whole point is trying to avoid the need to go to court. If you don't have a healthcare proxy, you need a guardianship. But even if you do have a healthcare proxy and there isn't the authority to allow the use of antipsychotic medication in that document, which is something that elder law attorneys offer, you still may need court authority called a Rogers monitor, which is a portion of a guardianship proceeding to allow the healthcare agent to approve the use of antipsychotics. So another important document, and this is something that you wouldn't fill out with your attorney, but you fill it out with your doctor, is a MOLST form. That is a medical order for life-sustaining treatment. And that document you fill out, it's the new DNR in Massachusetts. And you fill this out with your doctor. It's supposed to go on pink paper, and then you're supposed to put it on your fridge. And EMTs are trained to look for it. So they're legally required to follow your wishes. The living will comes with your estate plan. We recommend it with your estate plan package. It outlines your end of life wishes as well. It's not legally binding, but it is very helpful in the sense that if your loved one is now in the position that they need to make an end of life decision for you, they're going to be questioning themselves. It's obviously very sad. They might be second guessing your wishes, which you certainly should share with them now. But the living will is a good reference point for that healthcare agent. The next document is the HIPAA authorization and release. Another really great document to have in the event that, you list all your healthcare agents that you put in your healthcare proxy on this document, and then you may list some other family members. Anybody on this document can have access to your medical information. And it's particularly helpful when you're maybe in a stage of life where you're still making your own decisions, but you're needing some help, maybe from your kids or a friend or a sibling. Maybe they're, bringing you to your doctor's appointments. You want someone to listen in to, help you remember what the doctor said. Having those people on the HIPAA is really great for that period of your life. Next, I will talk about wills. So a will is a set of instructions to the probate court for what to do with your probate property. Probate property is property owned individually in your own name. So if you own real estate in your name alone, that's a probate asset. If you have an IRA and you forgot to put beneficiaries on the beneficiary designation form, that's a probate asset. Or if you have any individual bank accounts or a car. Probate isn't an issue per se, but it can delay inheritance by about a year. The whole process takes about a year and now longer with extra delays from COVID in the courts. And it also is a public process. So your estate is going to be a public record. So next I'll talk about trusts. So there's two options. You can do a revocable trust or an irrevocable trust. At this point in Bill and Susan's life, I would recommend a revocable trust, which, if their estate is worth more than $1 million, then as a married couple, there's some estate tax advantages to having a revocable trust. And any assets they put in there will then avoid probate as well. As they advance in age, hopefully they would sign up for our client care program, and then we would be checking in with them annually. And then we would talk about whether or not at some point it would make sense with their financial plan to do an irrevocable trust, which is a little bit more restrictive. We would have to communicate with Angela in terms of their financial plan, whether or not it would make sense, because if they ever need Mass Health to pay for their care in the future, which they may not, depending on their assets, we can remove the home as one of those assets by putting in an irrevocable trust, and then avoid a lien on their house from Mass Health if that is a possibility in the future. However, if they're getting long-term care insurance with the proper coverage, that can also help avoid a lien. So irrevocable trusts aren't right for everybody, especially if they're counting on the value of their home as part of their retirement, because then you lose access. You can't draw on the value of your home as part of your retirement. So then I would the next step would be to recommend that they go see a financial advisor to talk about long-term care insurance and long-term care, financial planning.
Thank you, Sam. So now that Bill and Susan have their estate plan in order, their next stop is to visit a financial planner. And that financial planner happens to be Angela Spears of New York Life. So Angela, can you help us out with Bill and Susan?
I can help you out with Bill and Susan. Thank you, Carol. Okay. So Bill and Susan, they're totally proactive and they're not reactive with their planning, which is great. Unfortunately, not everyone is like them. Most people don't want to address this type of planning, and they ignore factual evidence because they're fixating on an existing belief and they don't want to hear anything else. They rationalize their behavior and maybe say things like, I'll deal with it when the time comes. So this was an easy discussion with Bill and Susan. They realize they want to age in home and are taking steps to ensure that's possible. What they do not realize is that this planning also protects the family, which is huge. Families are often torn apart when there is not an equal effort amongst siblings to support their aging parents. So it's imperative to have a written plan in place. Obvious legal reasons aside, there may be assumptions that the parent has that is not okay with the family. So let's just say a daughter, for example, the mother has in the back of her mind, her daughter's going to take care of her. And the daughter says, no way, I want to travel to the other side of the world and not worry about it. So she may want to have some long-term care planning in place. What is long-term care and what is extended care? Bill and Susan asked this question. So extended care is assistance that a person needs because he or she has a long-term care impairment. The term extended care is commonly referenced opposed to long-term care because it gives the stigma that someone's going to end up in a nursing home, and that's not the case. So when you talk about chronic impairment, this breaks down to two categories. You have physical and then you have cognitive. Now, we're going to talk about ADLs, and ADLs are activities of daily living, and there are 6 of them, and I'll name them for you. You have transferring, you have toileting, bathing, dressing, eating, and continence. Cognitive loss is related to memory, orientation, reasoning, judgment as it relates to safety and awareness. So either help with at least 2 of 6 of those ADLs or the need for supervision for a cognitive impairment are considered being chronically ill in the context of long-term care insurance. So some benefits of planning. There's a lot of reasons why you want to do this type of planning, and it can never be too early. So take a look at the applicants who qualify for long-term care based on the age groups. And that is on the right there. Thanks, Carol. So the bottom slide, chances of approval, they naturally decrease as we age. So why New York Life for this type of planning? So working with a mutual company, highest rated in the industry at that, Bill knows he's at the advantage. I went on to educate Bill and Susan on the types of solutions we offer. They could be income-based, comprehensive insurance, use it or lose it, or they can be asset-based planning to create some leverage. Live, die, or quit, they're going to get something. So combining multiple solutions will complement not only their long-term care strategy, but it manages their overall risk as well. So after meeting with Bill and Susan, I fully understood that the implementation of long-term care planning was top priority. However, through a thorough analysis, I discovered that there was not a plan in place to replace a loss of Social Security upon one death. I also noticed that their portfolio was correlated to the market and Social Security was their only guaranteed income. I suggested repositioning a portion of their assets to create some guarantees, which also creates a more tax-efficient strategy, if you will. To address the long-term care funding, we used a multi-solution strategy, and the combination of this planning not only provides leverage, but also a hedge on the long-term care costs and inflation.
Bill and Susan now have their estate plan in order. They now have their financial plan in order. And we're going to take you through the next few years. Bill and Susan both retired in their early 60s. Their adult children got married, started families of their own. With all these changes, Bill and Susan realized they should check in with their elder law attorney, Samantha, to make sure their estate plan was up to date and working the way they intended it to. And then we're going to fast forward about 10 years. Bill and Susan are now both in their early 70s. And unfortunately, Bill has been hospitalized with a stroke where he has temporarily lost his ability to make decisions for himself. The hospital activated his healthcare proxy, which is part of his estate plan that he did with Samantha, and Susan is able to make healthcare decisions for him. Bill will need to be in the rehab facility for a few weeks, and Bill and Susan had planned with Samantha and Angela specifically for this what-if type of scenario. So Bill would like to return home and receive care services there. So having Bill's power of attorney document in place means Susan is allowed to get the long-term care insurance claim initiated. So remembering the in-home support that Bill's father received way back when he had his medical crisis, Susan reached out to Dave Tasto at Assisting Hands Home Care to fill him in on Bill's situation. Susan was prepared to put another element of their Aging in Place plan into action. So Dave, what elements of care would you be discussing with someone like Bill and Susan?
Just as Carol mentioned, I'm owner at Assisting Hands Home Care, but also author of Thriving at Home, a handbook for preventing hospital stays. And I'll reference items from this book while sharing Susan and Bill's journey as staying out of the hospital or rehab is critical to realizing the objective to age in place. So Susan brought me up to speed on Bill's situation. And although no one can really predict a stroke from occurring, acting appropriately as they did immediately after can surely improve Bill's outcomes. Fortunately, that was the case for Bill, and he is on a solid path to recovery after the trip to the hospital and then into rehab. So our focus for Bill was to ensure that he could realize his wish to age in place. And that meant, basically continuing his recovery at home. focusing on building up his strength and balance, and then regaining his independence. And I'll get into a little bit more detail as we go. In addition, as I mentioned about aging in place, a key piece of it is to avoid a rehospitalization or a return trip to the hospital, and that's what we'll talk about. Lastly, we'll get into how to get extra support at home and provide a break for Susan as the primary caregiver. So on this slide here, basically with a stroke history and with a few other chronic conditions, Bill is at increased risk for a return trip to the hospital. So the focus for him is making sure that there is a smooth transition home, which is a key piece to making sure that we don't have a return trip. And just as a statistic, there's your increase in likelihood to go back to the hospital after a discharge or after leaving the hospital is significantly increased. But on average, 1 in 5 Medicare patients go back to the hospital in just 30 days. So there's a real need, even at elevated risk beyond that, probably that 1 in 5 with a stroke history. We want to make sure that we do everything we can to have a smooth transition home and prevent the likelihood or reduce the likelihood for going back. So following all the discharge instructions is critical. One of the things is called non-compliance, is what the healthcare system would refer to it, is basically just not following the instruction is one of the top reasons for a return trip to the hospital. Also, for Bill's condition, the stroke history, knowing what's normal or abnormal, and that will help him know when an escalation is needed with his healthcare providers. For example, if he was in pain or from side effects from the stroke or whatever might be specific to his condition, knowing that will help him understand when to contact a healthcare provider to know if he does need to go to the emergency room or not. But it starts with knowing what's normal and abnormal. And there could be, things to know about the medications, for example. Coming out of the hospital, he has probably a new medication list and other things to mind. Well, being on top of them and understanding what's a normal side effect is another example of what to watch out for. Again, attending all the follow-up appointments, being prepared with the questions you want to ask of your primary care is, again, critical to making sure that you stay on top of your health at home. Having help at home to mind all the details and provide the assistance is, as needed is critical, while Bill figuratively and literally would get back on his feet. Basically, because of the stroke, he does need to regain his strength and get his balance back. But having someone help at home, in this case, Susan was his primary caregiver, and she was able to provide a lot of that help. I mentioned the chronic conditions here, but the good news, when there is a lot to do at home, there is a lot that you can actually do on your own. And a lot of the stuff I'll go through isn't that complicated, and it's stuff that families are doing these days, but not everybody is aware of all this stuff. So that's where I want to go through some of the details. Susan is able to help manage all of Bill's new medications, take him to all the follow-up appointments, and also coordinate his, therapy visits at home. Well, often after a stroke, you have physical therapy or occupational therapy as well. She's able to help him with all that. But getting answers to questions and staying in touch with the healthcare providers, as I mentioned earlier, is key. And for Susan, knowing when to escalate to one of those providers gives her the confidence that she can help him at home. I would say always contact your healthcare provider if you do experience abnormal symptoms or pain. In a sense, pain is an indicator of something going wrong, and you should be monitoring what your level of pain or what your loved one's level of pain is. Keeping a logbook or taking notes is also critical to kind of assess if it's increasing or decreasing as well. So getting into some of the specifics, now that Bill is back at home and managing around himself as much as possible at home, we want to kind of take a reassessment of the home for safety when he arrives back home. So staying safe at home is critical to making sure that he doesn't have a trip again back to the hospital. And the number one reason, stroke or not, the number one reason that older adults go to the hospital is because of a trip or a fall. The great news is, though, is that many of these falls are preventable, and there are many things you can do for yourself or your loved one at home. So for Bill, Susan wants to make sure that all of the trip hazards were removed, getting rid of the throw rugs, cords, uneven floor transitions, and so forth. Addressing those transitions is critical. But you have to identify them. She has to go through the house and look at it, from that perspective of, what could be a hazard. She did install a second railing on the stairs to help with Bill having one side being weaker after the stroke. So whether it's going up or going down, we want to make sure that he has the right support in either arm to make sure that he's able to get up and down safely. Obviously, she can be there to assist in case, but it's a good practice. Grab bars and other supports were also put in place in the bathroom, near the toilet or the shower, where you have to get up and down or change your center of gravity or your balance. Just to have that extra support is very helpful. Kind of goes without saying, but we should also make sure to have towels or other things to clean up spills in the bathroom or the kitchen where the floors can be slippery. Items in the kitchen that are commonly used could be placed in very easy to reach locations. So we don't have to have Bill reaching up to the cupboard to get a mug or a bowl. Again, we want him to be doing as much as we can at home, maintaining his independence. But why don't we place the mugs or bowls upside down on the countertop? Just simple things that you can do, but that make a big difference in helping prevent that off balance or fall. So to help Bill regain his independence, the focus is on his strength, coordination, and balance, following all of the exercises that the physical and occupational therapists are prescribing. Susan works through these in between all of the visits with Bill to keep him on a solid path to recovery. And again, I want to mention, just stress before I move to the next slide, that it's critical for him to age in place, and get through his recovery, to have him keep doing as many things as possible, using those limbs or something that might not be as strong or might not have all the connections after the stroke. Continuing to encourage him to do all that will actually help him maintain or get to his independence much quicker than it would be if his wife just did things for him, or if he did get outside help, that they did things for him. So we want to encourage that independence. That's a critical piece to age in place. All right, shifting gears. So I'm gonna share a little bit about what home care is, and then how we might get some help for Susan. So home care is primarily non-medical support for basic everyday activities. As Angela mentioned, those activities of daily living, she talked about the primary activities of daily living that really indicate whether or not you have a chronic condition from a long-term care perspective. But there are a lot of other activities of daily living that folks could get help with at home. Some of them on their slide here, but assistance in leisure activities or hobbies, like going, in Bill's case, as he gains more and more of his strength, getting back to what he was doing before the stroke, like going back to the driving range. His swing might not have the strength or the coordination he's had before the stroke, but let's get him back out to the driving range. Or if he's used to cleaning up around the house, let's have him help him clean up around the house and do some basic daily tasks. After the stroke, though, for Bill, getting around the home safely was really what was the focus, and ensuring, that the compliance with all the instructions after the hospital stay, getting to his appointments, taking notes during the appointments was critical as well, and sharing those notes. Family members are often, wanting to hear what was going on, how is Dad's recovery doing, as he has the adult children, probably grandchildren at this point now. So communicating out is another key piece where home care can help, but with capturing care notes. During our initial assessment with Bill and Susan, when we started up services, Susan mentioned that she still wanted to get out and visit with a few friends, twice a week, that she had probably had some groups that she was meeting with, and she wanted to continue doing that. So we're providing that, much needed break for her, a respite so she could recharge and take care of herself, from that mental health perspective as well. So it can be daunting, to start the search for extra help. And here are some, we have some tips, should extra help be needed at home. And I would recommend, though, reaching out to firms, as you work through maybe an aging in place plan, and we can have some follow-up worksheets to help you with that. But establish relationships with firms, like Generations or New York Life, well before there's a crisis, as Bill and Susan did. It shouldn't go without saying that planning, as Angela mentioned as well, is so critical, because you're much better able to, objectively assess if a firm is a match for you. So I do want to stress that, but so smooth transitions, we talked a lot about making sure that transition home is critical. And I did stress, maintaining that independence so that he can continue on his path to recovery and do much more independently as his, strength and balance increase. Having personalized, support or care plans tailored to individual needs is really a basic requirement these days. All home care or care at home should be tailored to the individual. It's person, or patient-centered care is really what the terminology is, but that's kind of table stakes for care at home these days. In addition, though, having a support team in place, for the caregivers, who can help promptly, escalate to healthcare providers or families, will surely make, for a positive experience, and can also even improve the health outcomes for your loved one. Also, in talking to firms, I would ask about how they embrace technology to ensure the quality of care and communications. These days, you should be able to have daily updates, access to, as I mentioned, the caregiver notes from each shift. They can be uploaded electronically and accessed through a secure, online portal, so that family members can be aware of what's going on.
Thank you so much, Dave. Now that Bill and Susan have been through the planning and actual use of their aging in place plan, we want to review a couple of key points. After a short period, Bill was able to regain mental capacity and his healthcare proxy was deactivated. After a few months, he regained strength and independence at home. And after about 6 months, Bill was doing well enough that services could be suspended. Fortunately, a large portion of Bill's support at home was paid for through his long-term care insurance policy. And through planning for extended care, we can have the ability to age in place or live our retirement where we want to. The health aspects are enough to manage. Having legal and financial support in place makes the experience much less of a burden during a critical time. Because Bill and Susan had their plan in place, their adult children were able to support their loved ones without the added stress of scrambling to help navigate this crisis. Bill and Susan created the roadmap for their adult children, who then went on to create plans for themselves, setting a trend for the future generations of the family. So we hope that this scenario was helpful in seeing how elder professionals work together to help you carry out your aging goals. So we're going to get to our question and answer portion of the webinar. There are some questions in the chat box that I want to get to. So this one looks like it would go for you, Sam. Someone has documents generated in New York. If they move to Massachusetts, will those documents still be in effect?
So in theory, yes, we have full faith and credit in this country, which means that the laws of other states have to be respected by each state. However, banks seem to make their own rules, and each bank is different. So at minimum, I would say get a new power of attorney and possibly a new healthcare proxy. And then depending on your situation in terms of the assets you have, if you're keeping property, I think the person said they lived in New York.
Yes.
In New York, like keeping real estate there, it would definitely be a good idea to get your estate plan reviewed. For instance, maybe if you're selling property in New York, buying property in Massachusetts, and maybe you want to do a revocable trust and make sure it matches with, Massachusetts estate tax, because it's going to most likely be different than New York, for instance. So basically, yes, your documents should stay in effect, but it wouldn't be a bad idea to get it reviewed and at minimum, new power of attorney, new healthcare proxy, if not other new documents.
Great. Thank you, Sam. It looks like someone asked a question, but it was answered in the chat. Thank you, Angela. But she was not understanding the difference between long-term care and extended care. And Angela said that long-term care is often referred to as extended care. And the 6 ADLs are transferring, toileting, bathing, dressing, eating, and continence. Thank you for that, Angela. We have another question that would be for Sam. What is the difference between living will and MOLST?
So a living will is something you can get with your elder law attorney. It is not legally binding, but outlines your end of life wishes. So it's a good reference point for your healthcare agents and doctors in the event that you are in an end of life situation. So everybody knows what your wishes were. MOLST is legally binding, and it's something you fill out with your doctor. It is the new DNR in Massachusetts. It goes on pink paper on your fridge, and if an EMT comes to your house, they're trained to look there, and they're legally bound to follow your wishes on that document.
Thank you. And what is your recommendation? I think this one is for you, Dave. What is your recommendation regarding stair lifts?
They can be very helpful. If there's no expectation, at least for a substantial amount of time, that there will be the ability to go up and down stairs, for sure they are recommended. Again, you can talk with your primary care physician about the need or the appropriateness of it, but having the ability to kind of recover from whatever kind of stroke or condition that you have, you'll want to be able to do as much as you can independently. So getting back to going up and down stairs is critical. Often the stair lifts will have a fold up seat or something like that, so that you can try to go back up and down the stairs, even though a stair lift may be installed. Great,
thank you. And Dave, this is also for you. What is the average daily cost of home care?
Well, the daily cost can depend on what type of support or how much support you have at home. Typically, home care is charged by the hour of support, and rates can range from the high 20s to, say, mid 30s dollars per hour. So if a 4 or 5 hour shift, you could be talking about, $100, $150 or more, depending on what type of help you might need. But home care can go from, a few hours a day, every other day or something like that, to around the clock care as well. And around the clock care, it can be hourly if you need wake ups at night. In addition, though, there's a type of care called live-in care, and where a caregiver would, in a sense, move in for a few days at a time. And that allows the caregiver to sleep. So for part of the time, they would not be working, in a sense. And the rates for that can be much more economical if you have the room for the caregiver to sleep and so forth. That could range, in the few hundreds of dollars per day.
And comparatively, just so you're aware, nursing homes at this point cost usually around $450 a day or more. So home care can definitely be a lot cheaper. And honestly, I think the state should make it easier for Mass Health to provide home care services for our clients. But there's a lot more restrictions on it, which economically doesn't make any sense.
Okay. And what if Bill did not fully recover? If Bill, say he had his stroke and he still wanted to stay at home, and he didn't regain his strength, what kinds of home health care would he be looking at?
Yeah. Again, it depends on the types of support he needs and how severe, the disability is from the stroke. Strokes can vary widely, from cognitive and speech to just a right side weakness. We had, similar to Bill's situation, we had a client that, after 9 months, he was back driving again from a stroke. So it can vary widely depending on how severe the stroke is. But that long-term care insurance could continue paying for his support. Often the claims can be open for a number of years. And then if Bill did recover after, for 3-4 years, they could restart paying premiums and continue with that same policy depending on how it's written.
All right. And when does hospice care usually take effect?
Thanks. It does take effect when there is no expected, in a sense, recovery, and the patient is not looking to have those life-sustaining treatments, as Sam was talking about earlier. Basically, they've decided to no longer want to go back to the hospital in a sense. Typically, there's a expectation, and a primary care physician would need to sign off, and the hospice medical doctor would sign off on a general expectation, life expectancy of 6 months or less. But hospice is a benefit. It's free. I can't stress that enough.
Right.
And also, a lot of people think when someone's on hospice, it's a death sentence, but it's not. And actually, some people can, with the different level of care, which is focused more on comfort, some people do graduate from hospice and come off of it.
Great point.
That's
Yep.
good to know. So we have clearances are important in a home. What is the clearance needed for a gurney in an emergency situation?
Typically, exterior doors are designed, within building standards to accommodate a gurney. There could be, interior doorways that are a little bit more restrictive, but typically there's standards for exterior doors. So I wouldn't worry about the exterior door. It's just more getting in around the house that could be a challenge.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Angela, I think this one is for you. Does long-term care pay indefinitely until needed?
There are different types of planning. So I will say yes and no. It depends what type of plan you have. But with regards to, will it last the rest of your life? It definitely can. It just depends what plan is in place.
I have clients though that a woman who right now has exhausted her policy at a nursing home. She's lived a long time, and so it's finally run out. So now we're actually in the process of doing a mass health application for her to have her nursing home care paid for, for the remainder of her life. So that's an option as well.
Excellent.
And the financial coverage for hospice, I see this question. So Medicare will pay for hospice. And I think, and I'm not sure if your supplemental insurance also covers some of it, but if a person's in a nursing home, for instance, and on hospice, then if they're, let's say we did a mass health application for them, mass health would continue to pay for the room and board. The room and board still has to be paid for in some way, but then Medicare and possibly the supplemental insurance picks up the hospice part of it. So if you were private paying at the nursing home, you'd still be responsible for room and board, just not the care.
That's good information. Somebody is a resident of Massachusetts but lives in Florida for 5 months of the year. How does that complicate things? And should he have a second primary care doctor in Florida? Sam, how would that complicate things as far as estate plan?
I would say, since you're in Massachusetts the majority of the year, then your estate plan should be based in Massachusetts. And then I think that'd be a question for your doctor. And also, I don't know if your insurance, I don't know how that works with insurance to have 2 primary care physicians. I think that'd be more an insurance question and a question for your doctor, because I'm not sure how it would be covered.
Comment about Florida. We've had clients who basically do the same thing that the person was mentioning, move down to Florida for part of the year. There are firms, we do have offices for assisting hands, for example, in Florida as well. So when you're looking at who you want to work with as part of your aging in place plan, you can ask questions like that, give all these things that you're asking now about where you live and your situation, raise those when you're putting together your plan, because there can be continuity of care. In our case, we were just able to refer it to an office in Florida. So it was a little bit smoother.
And also to add on to that too, we have, particularly for real estate attorneys, Florida, New Hampshire, Vermont, like all the places that Massachusetts residents tend to have second homes. We have connections with real estate attorneys, so we can always make, if you own property in a different state, if you're setting up a trust or something like that, we can make sure that it's transferred properly and have a real estate attorney from that state handle that piece of the transaction. And then Bruce asks, are assets in a revocable trust not counted for Mass Health? They are counted for Mass Health. If you wanted to protect a piece of real estate or any financial resources, they would need to be in a properly drafted irrevocable trust. And that trust would need to be drafted and funded more than 5 years before needing Mass Health to pay for your nursing home care.
I'm going to thank everybody for joining us, for the wonderful questions you had. I want to thank Dave, Samantha, and Angela for their expert information. So thank you, everybody, and have a great day.